So we'll begin the panel by asking each of the panelists to give brief opening remarks from their perspectives on their organization. And feel free to jump in and respond to any of the things you've already heard with regards to the polling. So why don't we start with you, Abel, and then we go to Basil and then Rod.
Okay, thank you, Lawrence. First of all, I would like to thank EI for partnering with APOA, the second year for organizing this event. The Association of Power Utility of Africa has been created in 1970. We are talking about 50 years ago, the first organization in Africa, with the name, the Union of Producer, Transporter, and Distributor of Electric Power in Africa, UPDA. And then, after 40 years of existence, we started with 11 utility founder members. After 40 years, in 2012, we went in a process of strategic plan, and we came out with rebranding the association, taking into the environment of the power sector in Africa by those days. So we transformed the organization into the Association of Power Utility of Africa, APOA, to include every kind of utility. And I forgot to mention that the headquarters is in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire for our country. We have today 56 member utility, active member utility in Africa. And we are operating in 46 countries. Why 46? Because some countries are not in the status that we can have activity like South Sudan, Somalia, Eritrea, and so on. So now we have also active affiliate member, have some 25 affiliate member in Africa, Europe, Asia, and of course America, and including KEPCO and other from Korea. And the association is in fact the specialized organization to the African Union Commission in power sector, for the power sector. So our main partner being the African Development Bank, who funding us a part of the contribution received from the member to develop the programs. The first focus of interest that we had in the 70s was the capacity building, because after the independence in Africa, it was not obvious that the African country could develop the power sector themselves. So pulling effort together was the main focus, with the creation of the High School of Engineers based in Africa, in Ivory Coast. From 1978 to 2000, we have trained more than 250 engineers. Some of them, many of them are working in the United States and other country, Gulf country, even in other organizations. Some are ministers, some are utility CEO today. So roughly, this is APOA. Talking about centralized, decentralized, like you said, Africa is diverse. We have our members from Egypt to South Africa. You have all kinds of utility. You have utility with installed capacity of more than 40 gigawatt. You have utility sitting with 1 megawatt in some time in the country. So this creates a kind of exchange and a partner like social cooperation, developing a program from utility to help another utility to advance, because the energy access today in the northern country are almost 99%, while some countries are situated with less than 10% of access to modern electricity. So all those made that APOA, partnering with African Union, with African Development Bank, and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa developed lastly one program, unique program, the PIDA, the Program of Infrastructure Development for Africa, where we went by country level to regional level, from regional to African level, to have one unique program of infrastructure development focusing the generation of clean energy. So in the PIDA program, the priority action include only clean energy to make the fossil generation step back in Africa, because if we don't care, all more or less African countries are sitting on oil and gas. Even the country are not producing today, tomorrow you discover that they have oil and gas. So if you don't work toward clean energy, would be tapping into only fossil energy. You know that the southern part of Africa have 7 billion tons of coal. So working with countries, city or coal, promoting clean energy is not obvious. So we are promoting the clean energy to make the clean energy have more part of the generation. That is roughly the situation in the sector in Africa.
We'll come back with some more questions on the future. And I probably forgot to say we're going to be focusing on the future of the African electricity sector. And I have some questions that will dig deeper into this whole idea of the future. Basil, can you talk about UK Power Network? And if you can, from your vast experience having worked all over the world, how do you view this future from your perspective for the African electricity sector?
Thank you, Lawrence, and good morning all, and thank you for inviting us again for the second year, which is good, and well done to EEI for the initiative. I'm the CEO at UK Power Networks. UK Power Networks is the electricity distribution company which delivers electricity in London and the southeast of England to some 22 million people, 8.2 million connections, both domestic and industrial and commercial customers. UK Power Networks is an investor-owned utility. It's owned by the Chongqing Group. The Chongqing Group is the Li Ka-shing controlled world conglomerate based in Hong Kong. It operates in some 54 countries around the world and is regarded as one of the biggest foreign investors in the UK. I originally came from Australia, and there are a lot of similarities between Australia and what I imagine and what I know about Africa, in that there are a lot of the large cities, and in Australia you can sort of pick sort of half a dozen large cities, but then there are a lot of smaller population centres which are away from the major population centres. And it's interesting I've been away from Australia some 12 years, but I still keep tabs as to what's happening there. And with the decentralisation of the industry, what is happening in Australia, it seems to be that they're looking at coming off the grid by having local generation, largely solar. And when I look at the temperature in Australia, and I can imagine the abundance of sun in Africa, I wonder whether there's an opportunity for the African country actually to leapfrog and actually catch up with the Western world, whether it'll be Australia or the UK, by moving directly to clean energy, as you say, and decentralised clean energy. So I'll be very interested in talking about that and see whether there is an opportunity actually for Africa to bypass the centralised system and move to a decentralised, a clean energy system at the same time as the rest of the world is doing that.
Thank you. Rod, your thoughts, and I know from your perspective, resilience is something you think about a lot in terms of planning for the future. And so, as you give your comments, can you probably just give us some thoughts on this idea of planning for a future with a lot of uncertainty around and the need for building resilience into your strategy?
Sure, and good morning, everyone. My name is Rod West. I'm the group president for the Entergy Corporation Utilities. We provide power to the Gulf states of the United States, Louisiana, parts of Texas, Arkansas, Mississippi. I was asked this morning if I asked Dr. Jones, how can I be helpful? Because I'm in town and I knew this gathering was taking place. Be careful what you ask and what you ask for. And he said you could bring your perspectives to a conversation we're having this morning. The perspective of Entergy being in the midst of the Gulf South, being in Hurricane Alley, for the last 12 years that most of you would think about New Orleans and the Gulf South, other than Mardi Gras, it's around resiliency, climate change, the impacts on populous coastal cities. The debate we've been having for the last decade and plus, and I think it's relevant here, around this notion of quantifying the risk that's at stake with coastal cities, with populous cities, but also electrifying those areas that aren't as populous, and socializing the cost, the true cost that you made reference to, whether it's $300 to US dollars to connect. From a public policy perspective, we all know what the cost of the delivered electron is. Whether it's the central station power paradigm that this industry in the US has enjoyed for the last century, or our point of view for the next 25 to 50 years of what this decentralized service delivery model is to look like because of the advent, the progress of technology. Unless we have a common conversation around what the objective is, all of us are going to be arguing our economic books. What we did differently and how we've thought differently about the problem after Katrina was, instead of having a conversation around climate change is a conversation you get to have after the bills are paid, after your children are fed and are educated. We actually quantified the assets that drove the respective economies, that fed the quality of life for citizens, both in the cities where the populations were dense, and included the rural areas, and made a decision around how we would focus on delivering electrons, delivering that life, and candidly, hoping that the body politics would align with this, just putting it bluntly, the socialization of costs and the socialization of benefits around assets at risk, such that from a resiliency standpoint, it makes absolutely no sense in the world for the utility company to be the only group thinking about the resilience of its assets, knowing that electricity is important to the economy, to quality of life, but that the other, let's call it factors of production for the nation's economy in this case, whether they be oil and gas, energy providers, whether it be other sectors of the economy, that everyone's having a conversation around resiliency to have a more socialized point of view around the availability of electricity and its importance to the quality of life. It's been an ongoing debate for us in the U.S. Mr. Vince in the back is part of our regulatory regime in the city of New Orleans. That smart cities concept that he's talking about is going to be a test case for this notion of socialized benefits for the least among us, because we have some of the poorest areas in our service territory, not just in the city of New Orleans, but throughout the Gulf South, where on a unit basis, we have people that we know cannot afford to enjoy the benefits of a renewable portfolio of services. And so from a public policy standpoint, we know it is the cost of the delivered electron and all the value that comes along with it over some denominator. And whether that denominator is kilowatt hours, whether it's households, whether it's businesses, and how we spread that amongst customer classes, we don't have a shot at being successful long term unless we're clear on what the ultimate objective is. And I bring that perspective to the conversation because it's not a question of Africa versus Australia, and I've traveled to Australia to get a perspective there. It's what do we believe is the lowest common denominator of human experience, human existence that we're prepared to support because of what electricity allows. And so I humbly bring that perspective to you because we're living it in real time, trying to figure out how do we bring this life-giving commodity to people regardless of where they are. But the question was brilliant on the front end, by the way, those 4 or so questions, because the key is not which one, the key is understanding how interrelated all of those components really are.
Thank you, Rod. And there will be time for some Q&As because I can imagine after hearing these 3 gentlemen, there are a lot of questions spurring in people's heads. So I'm going to short circuit my interaction with them to open the floor for you guys to have the opportunity to quiz them. But just coming back, one quick question for you, Abel. In terms of the future of Africa as you see it from an electricity standpoint, can you just quickly tell us 1 or 2 of the key challenges that you see that we have to overcome to electrify the continent, and the opportunities that we see on the horizon? Just quickly give me your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Lawrence. There are not 2, there are 5, on my point of view. First, you have an economic growth, sustained growth, despite the crisis, 6.5, 6% growth per annum. Some country with 2 digits before the oil crisis. Second, you have this demography, 2 billion heading for 2050. Nigeria, Egypt, Ethiopia, DRC, more than 100 million people. Third, urbanization, we talk about it. In some countries, 60% of people live in town. And now, last not the least, the age of the population, they are youth, more than 50%. Those people need energy. To power the economy, all the mining countries, they are in Africa, the controversial part is that we are all mine giant and energy none. No electricity when you have mine. If you don't transform those raw material locally, you have more people from Lampedusa. So you develop locally. To develop, you need power. Not only solar panel, but we are talking about 1,000 megawatts today. Secondly, to fix the news where they are, you need to create jobs. To create jobs, to make their work. If not, they are not only not working, but they're consuming energy. All the day, they are consuming energy because they are not working. So to face those challenges, we need quickly to transform the power utility. So we are working on the transformation of the power utility. What is the future, the utility of the future? Is that the main focus of not only APOA, but ADB and the African Union. We need to transform the utility. We have to combine all technology. Today, in every utility, we have renewable energy department, where in every country, we create the rural electrification agency, create the renewable energy agency, but people are always focusing the utility. If they are not a customer of the utility, they are not comfortable. So the utility became the key player, even though in the country we have this decentralized system. The decentralized system are monitored by the utility. Many utility commissioned this year or last year, the 50, 100 megawatt solar panel connected to the grid. Connection to the grid need technology because it's the intermittency. All those technology, wind, solar, we have it in abundance, but we need to monitor the grid to receive it. So those challenges brought us to work on the transformation of the power utility. The digitalization we are talking about, all our utilities today are monitoring customer management with digital because the GSM revolution in Africa, more than 700 million cell phones working. Today, the GSM business have more profit than oil business. I mean profit, not turnover, profit. So using this GSM revolution, all power utility are today on electronic transaction. In Côte d'Ivoire, nobody go today to the customer center to pay bill. You are in your room, you click your cell phone, you pay your bill. This one brought us to think about cyber security. If we have any problem in the mobile money, we are lost. So all those are the new challenges that we are facing. So we enter the digital world while in the same time we are facing people who never have electricity. So we have to manage from bottom to the high technology. How you monitoring in the middle of this? When you go to Egypt, they are talking not about electrification, they are already electrified. They are talking about now smart grid only, the main focus. When you go to Central Africa, we need to give power to people. Those are the opposite side of the coin that we need to manage. That is, for that, we are talking about utility of the future. We have to work on this all direction, not losing interest of utility, because sometimes the CEO are not attending the meeting. When I found that, you want to talk about 1 million project, my concern not 1 million project, I'm working for 100 billion. We are talking about 1 million, but 1 million concern a country, and another country for 100 billion. So we need to bring all together. There we develop the exchange between utility. We have Tunisia going to another country, Rwanda, some Egypt going to Liberia, and so on. So we develop between utility to not focus only on North-South cooperation. South-South cooperation reinforced by North-South cooperation to come over. So it's working. You must say that if you go all the direction, you never reach the point. But this is what we need to do. We focus where we want to get it, but we have to bring all together. That is not easy. So these 5 of main challenges, we need to address them at the same moment. If not, you lose people on the way. They are no more interested because they already overcome this challenge you are talking about. That is the reality and the future. Yeah.
So Basil, one of the things I think Abel was trying to allude to was the role of the utility is not going to go away. Can you talk briefly about the situation in the UK where you have a lot of decentralized solutions coming online, and how do you manage the important role of the utility, the distribution system? Is this the platform? Is this something that we think could be applicable in parts of Africa?
Happy to do that, but I've actually got a question for Abel.
I like this.
It seems to me that, and there was a brief discussion yesterday, I think someone asked a question from the investors, what do we need from an African perspective to attract investment?
Right.
So I just wonder, the question is, have we got, in Africa, you've got the technology, right? Because the technology, I think, as someone said, is available and it will come. If you've got operational expertise to electrify the country at different levels, whether it will be at the traditional utility or whether it will be utility of the future. What's missing is the capital. How do you attract capital to Africa so that you've got the resources, both technological and labour resources, to be able to electrify the country? Am I oversimplifying it? That at the end of the day, it comes down to capital availability to electrify the country?
I must say that we need to change in the mind of the investors the perception of risk that they have in Africa. Today, any single country have developed an investment code, and they need to respect it. I will just give one example. I'm not naming the concerned body. One small consultant bureau in Canada have a contract 4 years ago with an entity in Africa. The job was performed, but apparently the customer was not happy with the result, but never announced that the job would not have meet the expectation, and the bill was not paid. The consultant bureau contacted me. I'm going to an arbitrage to have the money paid. I said, you can go. So the customer in Africa is an international organization. In 1 week, the arbitrage came to the result that the bill had to be paid. And they gave 1 month for the bill to be paid. I contacted the head of the organization. I said, how come that you don't pay the bill and you went through international arbitration? He said, my predecessor gave me the note that the job were not well done. But I said, now you need to pay. I went and meet the predecessor in his country. I said, how come that you don't pay the bill? He said, apparently this consultant bureau work with my people, I use my engineer to do the work, so but you don't announce it, now you have to pay. So now, in a country where the organization has its headquarters, receive a message that 1 week to execute the permit. It showed that today there are international organizations looking after any contract in Africa. The rules are the same. Talking about stability, yes, there's stability. And the needs are there. The project today, we are not talking, not more talking about no mature project. No, there are many projects that can be developed easily. So the investment is to approach, to leave the perception of risk, and to go and partner. There are many local private sector ready to partner with international private sector to execute projects. That is the best way. Many countries have declared that private public partnership are the way to develop the sector. And there are many IPP, but the IPP that we have only addressing generation. I want to see tomorrow the private transmission company making money in Africa. And the distribution side, we already have distribution company. CIE from Côte d'Ivoire is private totally private for 25 years today. And they are making good business in Africa. So there are room for investment. The transmission line is like the highways. If you invest today in transmission line, you make money because you can't develop in a country where the source are major facility and transport energy to another country. And you have customer. You have many customer. Today, you drop some 2,000, 4,000 megawatt in Nigeria, you can sell it. Any power that you sell to South Africa or despite the solar program, you sell it to the mining industry in Zambia and all those countries. So many mining companies are working on generator. That is not the best way. If they are on grid, they'll make more profit and they have better achievement. So to invest in Africa today is just to change the perception of risk and to go normal way. The regional economic community have power on the national entities. And every regional economic community have his legal framework, and you can address international entity to solve any problem that I gave you. So for me, it's just to change the perception that we have and to go. Like I said last year here, excuse me, the Chinese investments is not a choice, it's a solution. The perception of risk is very, I don't know how they study it, but no calculation for risk. They just go. So, welcome to Africa.
Well, we're going to definitely try and change the perception. Basil, I'm going to let you off the hook. You didn't answer my question, but you asked.
I'm happy to, but
But no, I will turn to, just before I open to the audience for a few questions, I will turn to Rod. Can you just talk briefly about the process, just for folks to understand the complication in developing this sort of this long-term strategic plan around resilience? So if you can ponder that, and then Basil, if you still want to come in and give a few remarks before we open it to the audience.
Yeah, the challenge around resilience is not inconsistent with my opening comments. Having a common, think about it as a stakeholder play. Who are the stakeholders in a conversation around resilience? For the investor-owned utility, we think about stakeholders as certainly you have the investors, the people who are putting forth the capital. You got the employees, but the communities that we serve. For us, resilience has been a difficult conversation because who benefits from resilience? Those who own the factors of production for the economy that electricity is supporting. And without getting too far down the rabbit hole, having clarity around who's going to ultimately benefit from the resilience of the system, because we're talking about an electrical system, and having clarity around how you think about the economic paradigm under which you spread those costs. And I can't put it more simply than that, because the conversation you just heard for the last several minutes is a microcosm of that very question. All of the benefits that come from this wonderful thing that we are a part of, the value of that delivered electron comes at a cost. And how we pay for it, and what are the regimes around which we pay for it, and who benefits from it ought to have a play into who pays for it. That's the resiliency conversation for us. It's not just a utility issue, it's a community issue. And we're dealing with it here in the United States, for us on the Gulf Coast, beyond the utility company. 35%, 40% of the US production of oil and gas comes through my service territory, our service territory, through the Gulf of Mexico. And the assets that drive that economy span from Texas to the panhandle of Florida. And we're having that very conversation. Unfortunately, it's in disparate regulatory regimes across the different states, each of whom is competing against the other for lowest cost, because they're looking at it from a competitive perspective, not a socialized benefit for the coast in general. And so you want to talk resiliency, let's talk about stakeholder benefit and how we think about spreading the cost from those who have the most by way of resources to those who demand, expect, or deserve a level of service that they can't afford to individually pay for. And so it's, I'll leave you with this. We did a report in 2010 called the Gulf Coast Adaptation Study. And it had to do with changing the conversation around resiliency and adaptation to hurricanes and other disasters, and expanding that debate beyond the conversation around the cost of electricity and the utility, and why wouldn't the utility be the only one benefiting from a resilience and adaptation strategy. But the Gulf Coast Adaptation Study will give you a good idea of our perspective of where we're coming from.
Excellent. You want to add a few, any comment?
Yeah, no, I'm just going to say that, I mean, resilience is a topic that is current just about across the world when it comes to electricity. You can talk about gas production, but it's just as important in a financial centre like London or New York. And what's happening in the electricity industry, we're going from a centralised to a decentralised. The reality is, as you go to a decentralised, the resilience that perhaps existed when it was centralised actually diminishes. And the argument that Rod's talking about, that he's obviously having with policymakers and regulators, we are having in the UK, is saying, hey, as we move to a decentralised system, who's actually going to pay for the resilience that needs to be continue to be there and continue to improve, because the reliance on electricity is increasing by the day, and therefore the expectation of resilience that was there 20 years ago is dramatically different today. And as you invest, someone's got to pay for it. And the expectation is similar to what Rod's explained, that the cost needs to be socialised. But as soon as you do that, there's the argument as to who benefits from the socialisation of the cost, because the domestic consumers will sit there and the politicians will sit there and say, but it should be the industrial and commercial consumers that benefit, and therefore should not be socialised. So the argument that Rod is having in his part of the world, I think it applies right across the globe.
Okay, we're going to open up for some questions, brief questions. So this is what we're going to do. You state your name and ask your question. If you start to diverge from a question to a statement, the robot is going to come and stop you. So name, question, and then we'll take a few questions from this side. We'll take a couple of questions from here, and then we'll come back and let the panel respond. So a few questions from here. The lady at the front, and then we'll have Kingsley.
Can you hear me from here?
No, there's a microphone.
I want to pick up on Rod's conversation about, I'm sorry, my name is Jamie Bracey, Philadelphia. And so my question picks up on Rod's concept of resiliency. And as we're looking at advancing new technologies, particularly in blockchain, that draw tremendous amounts of energy, but are designed to, at least in the worlds that I'm working in, to democratize universal basic incomes, but they drain such an extraordinary amount of resources from the energy grid. Can you talk a little bit about resiliency in terms of blockchain's not going away? We're not talking about cryptocurrencies, we're talking about blockchain applications, and the fact that we're trying to increase people's quality of life using that advanced technology. Who are the stakeholders as the new technologies come in that are, in effect, draining the grid?
Okay, next one. Kingsley?
Rod,
There's a microphone.
Oh, sure.
Remember, name and question.
Kingsley Osei. My question is for Rod. I think you talked about socializing the cost of asset at risk. And I know that there was a recent attempt by the current administration, the so-called baseload rule, to recover most of the cost of the baseload power plants. I want to make sure that you are talking about the same thing. Is that your perspective?
Okay, so 2 questions for Rod. He will keep it. Let's take 2 more in the middle. Lamin, and who else on this side? So Lamin here.
My question is addressed to Abel, Lamin Savadogo, Marathon Energy Systems. Here, every report you hear about Africa ends with, in Africa, where most people live on less than $2 a day. This gets stuck in the people's mind. So in the power sector, is it a fact that people will be capable of paying for the power plants, the additional power plants that are built if investors came in? Because the perception is that if you live on less than $2 a day, then you don't have money to spend on power. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from that side? No? All right, so let's come to the panel. We'll start first with the question about blockchain.
And I'm not being dismissive, but I will attempt to dismiss the blockchain as something different. The blockchain is a capability, regardless of whether it becomes to support future transactions, to support cryptocurrency. The demand is simply demand. And public policymakers will have to, at some point, have a conversation around the value of blockchain technology, no different than the internet to society. And so but it feeds into your question around what I meant when I said socialization of costs. I don't mean socialization of costs in a generic sense. What I was referring to specifically is the predominant regulatory regime in the United States where our investor-owned utilities are regulated by their state or in this case of New Orleans, our local regulators, where in setting the cost for the electric service that I have a fully vertically integrated utility, generation, transmission, distribution. It's a cost of delivered service that is socialized across customer classes in the rate-making mechanisms. And so when I speak of socialization, I'm talking about it in the rate-making sense of how we spread the cost of delivered service within a specific territory. And so that's a distinction from the administration question. I am not going to get trapped into that one, but I appreciate the question.
Any other comments on the blockchain or no? Okay, Abel, the question that Lamin asked regarding $1 or $2 a day for everything else except electricity.
Yes. Affordability. First of all, I would like to mention that one main topic in Africa is the cost or the tariff. We prefer working to clean the network, to improve the customer management, reduce losses, than talking about tariff increase. Because many utilities have more than 40% less loss on the system. So if you clean the system, you reduce your no technical losses, you make more money than increase the tariff. Because you increase tariff to feed losses. And for the tariff affordability, once again, GSM and oil company demonstrate that the problem is not the price, it's how we address people. In many countries, when the oil of the price on the filling station change, it's the Minister of Trade come on the TV to explain why the price is changing. You never see it for electricity because none of the power utility have to make to manage its business. No. People are using GSM not for free. They can pay. For that, we main focus now on prepaid meter because people can give you $1 every day, but don't ask for $30 at the end of the month. They don't have. So by day to day, they can recharge the meter and consume. Look, when you go on a place where they charge the cell phone, they pay some, it's 20 cents to charge the cell phone. The cell phone is 5 milliamperes. It's 1,000 CFA, $2 or $3 per kilowatt hours. They are paying $3 for kilowatt hours. You say that 30 cents is too much. They're already paying it. Because when you pay to charge, just make a calculation. If 5 million pay to charge for 30 minutes, you pay $3. So all is how the sector is managed. They can pay because those people we are addressing are like in poverty. They are the one who put their children at school, they pay the school fees, and they are today senior staff for the utilities, senior staff for the country. So don't put people in the poverty where they don't need it. They need to be addressed differently. They can pay. If not, the GSM industry cannot be so flourished in Africa. So this gave us that we need to go on digital mode. We need to reduce all customer management fees so that the price that we have today, we don't want to change it. In some cases, we even can reduce if we reduce our losses in the system by a few investments. So if people, anything we don't change is reducing. Because if you are advancing, you don't change your price, so you are reducing because all equivalent price in the commerce is changing. So if you don't change your price, you are reducing. So we better invest in reducing our losses in the system, maintain the same price, and better approach to get this paid back by day-to-day management, by prepaid meter, mobile system, and so on. Yeah. But I can assure that they can pay.
I think we'll get some thoughts from that in the next panel, which should be on operational excellence. So if there's no other question, I will wrap this up by asking each of the panelists to just give their final thoughts on this idea of the future of African electricity sector. And Rod, you touched on the idea of value. I think that's what you were alluding to, and which is where I think he's coming from. So in essence, it's not that African customers cannot pay, except that they don't perhaps understand the value of electricity, or we have to do a better job selling the value of electricity. So just to wrap things up, can each of you give us a quick 30-second sum up of how you view the future of African electricity sector from any vantage point you wish to go?
I'll make the comment. I'm not qualified to give advice to our friends in Africa other than my own experience. We are in the U.S. dealing with the disruption that comes from the 100 years of central station power transmission to the distribution side of the business, where technology is providing enforcing us to invert that value proposition, where now the customer and what they were doing and how their life was affected by the delivered electron is where the value is. The value will become less and less on the value of the production of the electron and more on the value of the quality of life that's impacted by it. And that's where the public policy debate is going to continue to be, particularly here in the US. And my hope is that whatever successes we have will inure to the benefit of our brothers and sisters on the African continent.
Thank you, Rod. Basil?
Yeah, I think I'll finish off where I started. I think there's a great opportunity for Africa to actually, as I said, leapfrog and go from, while the rest of the world is going from a centralized system to a decentralized system, I think Africa can actually move at the same time and go decentralized, but it seems to me that there needs to be regulatory and political stability, because with that you will get capital inflows and technology coming to the country. And I think it's true that Africa could be electrified.
Thank you, Basil. Abel, 30 seconds, last wrap up.
Yes, I would like to transmit an appeal for our main partner, the African Development Bank. You know, the New Deal for Africa is roughly to add 160 gigawatts from now to 2025, 130 million on grid connection, 70 million off grid connection. This will need 60 to 90 billion a year from now to 2025. And the bank will put 12 million every year, the coming 5 years, 12 million of his own resources. The cap is waiting for the investors to go with the bank. With this, is to achieve the universal access from now to 2030. And in this, all the system are weighted. So today, we are focusing tomorrow having not only customer, but prosumer. They are producing and consuming. You must notice last year when we were in Zambia that every roof have its panel with a meter. When it's consuming from the network, the meter work. When it is producing on the roof solar panel, it's going back to the ZESCO network. So at the end of the month, sometime the customer is receiving money. These are the customers for tomorrow, the prosumers. With this, the universal access is achievable.
On that note, please join me in thanking the panel. And I would like to call up our next panel immediately.